Great. Good evening. It is Monday, June 9th, 2025. It is 7 o'clock, and as it is a reorganization evening following the elections, I get to call tonight's meeting to order. So I'll call the meeting to order. Um, and the first item on the agenda is committee reorganization.
I would like to make a motion to nominate Christy Boudreau as the chair.
Second.
All right, we have a
You
motion,
all
a
have
second.
opportunity. Anyone that wants it.
Duly noted.
Okay.
Any discussion? Okay, we'll do a vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 All right, unanimous, and I will pass it over to our chair, Christy Boudreau.
Okay. I would love to entertain nominations for a vice chair tonight.
I will nominate Kathy Engelhardt to continue in that position.
I would second that nomination. Is there any discussion about Ms. Engelhardt as vice chair?
I appreciate the two of you as a team.
Thank you. Thank you. And I always like knowing Kathy's there as a backup. she'll take her. Okay. All in favor of Kathy Engelhardt as vice chair of the school committee, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you very much. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
And I think we can wait till the next meeting to talk about subcommittees, if that is acceptable to folks.
Just stick with what we're doing until then.
Just to hold
Yep.
hold the course for now.
Yep.
And if anyone wants to talk about having a different spot, you can speak up. But we can put those on the agenda because they need approval technically.
Totally.
But we could do that at the second June meeting,
That sounds good to me.
our micro meeting.
Yes.
So with that, we will move to public comment. Is there anyone with us this evening that would like to make a public comment? We'll start with anyone online that would like to make a public comment. You're welcome to join us. Okay. So we will move on to our next item, which is mission moments. Moments of the district we'd like to highlight.
I would like to start, and I will mention graduation. It was just a beautiful evening, wonderfully put on by Dr. Boyle, who is our graduation advisor. The student speakers did an amazing job, and just what a group. It was a perfect evening, despite the rain. It was wonderful.
The coverage in the Gazette was really lovely
It's great.
and spoke to some of the things that make Smith Academy special. So that was nice to see.
I have some mission moments tonight. I know I usually
Please.
don't,
Ooh.
but I have three. So sorry for three.
No, you're making up for the year. I love it.
I also got to attend graduation. I was the school committee rep this year, and I haven't been in 15 years. So it was nice to see how it stayed the same, but how it's changed. It was nice. It was cute. It was endearing. It was fun. It seemed more fun than it was when I was actually in it. So I enjoyed that quite a bit.
A move in the right direction.
Yes. I also just want to recognize teachers and paraprofessionals or ESPs who keep showing up to kids' sports games in their spare time,
Oh, that's
which is
nice.
fantastic. My son is in grade 1-2 coach pitch baseball, and along with several of his teammates, and we've had second grade teachers there, first grade teachers there. A couple of paras have shown up. And it's really nice to see that they care about their students and they're going above and beyond. So I thought they should be recognized for that.
That's awesome.
And then the last thing was, while waiting in the preschool playground for pickup, I was speaking with another grandparent who was a representative from Northampton at at like a DESI event about civics. And apparently Smith Academy had representatives there, and she thought they were fantastic. They were engaged and knowledgeable, and she wanted me to know, so I wanted to share that as well.
Oh, that's fantastic.
I have two.
Yeah.
So the first one is Thursday night was the Lions Club dinner for the seniors, and I was the school committee rep to attend that, and it was so lovely. It was short and sweet. It was about an hour. but really intimate, really wonderful. Hearing about the kids individually, lovely dinner. The Lions Club members were wonderful hosts, and they talked about how this was the first time since the pandemic that they've done this, since before the pandemic. So it's nice that they brought it back. They're eagerly looking forward to next year to continue it on and perhaps do it a week or two before graduation so that they're not piled up in the busy week. And they hope to be more involved with the school in any other way that they could be. That they were really, really strong supporters of Hatfield Public Schools and of Smith Academy, and emphasized their support in it. So I
That's
thought that
lovely.
was important. And then the other thing was today I also attended the first annual Geography B for fourth grade. And that was a really nice little event that Miss King and Miss Bosman put on, showcasing the kids' knowledge about everything they learned in geography this year. And there were 7 kids, and they really were well matched. And there were a couple tricky questions that caught a couple of them. But they know their stuff. That was really impressive to see.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, I wanted to take a chance at Mission Moments to give a shout out to the Hatfield PTA, who all year long really goes above and beyond to do the little extras. And I know there have been field trips galore wrapping up, and they did the big summer blast off this last weekend. And our district is much improved by their efforts. And so I think the parents who organize that and run those events and volunteer for those events, and to the many, many parents who fund the things that happen, because it helps us do things we wouldn't otherwise be able to do. So thank you, PTA. Other mission moments? You feeling pressured now to jump on?
I guess you can't pressure me. I'm fine. But I actually did have one that I wanted to say today, at the risk of being just piling on all the great things. But this is really a very fun celebratory time of year in like the life cycle of a school. And so I got to attend the band concert, which was, for the first time ever, I believe, a combined 5th grade through 12th grade band concert at Smith Academy. And I thought that was really cool. And it was very special. And definitely a shout out to Leah Gardner for like very intentionally picking pieces that the entire band could play. So it was just very nice to have there was the 5th and 6th grade kind of did their things. And then the high school band, and then middle school and high school band all came in and stood in a circle around them, and they all played actually a really fun arrangement all together. And it was just very sweet that she could pick something that could really bring the entire band and all of Hatfield all together. And so that was very nice. And then saw a reprisal of it at the spring concert at the elementary school, which was also, of course, delightful and very cute. Yeah. But anyway, I just wanted to say that I thought that was a really good example of having both the schools doing something together, which we don't get to do a lot.
Mhm.
Thank you.
And a great way to build a band program.
Also,
Any more mission moments? This is a record number of mission moments.
I actually gave one, so it's a record.
It's a record right there. So
I'll just say that actually the Gold Book program, which I know I'm kind of jumping ahead a little
it's
bit,
okay.
but we purchased Gold Book to actually help move away from growth-based goal writing to standards-based goal writing. And our new teacher at the elementary school has embraced that and has already come to meetings with standards-based goals written using that program. So it's kind of a nice win for us.
And when I saw the warrant come through to pay for that, I looked it up to see what it was like. Because sometimes you're signing what are we approving the cost of? You want to understand. And I was really delighted to see that purchase, because it really looks like it will be an asset to that team. And anything we could do to make their jobs a little bit easier is so such a good deal. Any more? Do you have a last one? Anything else?
I mean, I have tons of them, but most of them have been said tonight.
Okay. Is there anything that needs to come off the consent agenda? There's 2 sets of minutes. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much.
May I ask a consent agenda question?
Indeed.
I thought that we don't need to approve it. I thought it just rolls unless we object to it.
I was under that impression too, and there are sort of 2 standards, and I had a request that we look at, like, actually, it's just there to help get it all together so we don't have to get separately. So since that was pointed out, we have made a point of,
Okay. All right. It was just a process question.
nope, totally understand. So with that, we will go into administrative reports. And I think being such a particularly busy season, all of the administrative reports were a little bit headlined this time. Totally understandable. So if you, Dr. Driscoll, do you want to speak to yours?
Sure, and I can do. There's a few things I want to talk about in the district report primarily. So the first is a kind of an overview of where we are in the process of the capital projects.
Okay. And that's
So-
going to show up on the agenda with school finance, but you can cover it here. That's fine.
Okay. All right. So we, because of the size of the projects, the boiler and the roof projects together, we're required to have what's called an owner's project manager. So that's part of, it's essentially a job that the town hires for, to have someone that kind of oversees that work, someone who knows the ins and outs of those things, because either I'm not a facilities manager, Andrew's not a facilities manager, and so we have that job posted, or we had an informational meeting with interested parties in that job last week. So that was Tuesday. By Thursday, they have their information into the town, and then we'll make a decision by Thursday on kind of who that's going to be. And that person will be in charge of working with us to really formulate the bid to make sure it gets everything that we want into it, and it gets out to contractors. So that's where we are with that. So once that bid is created, once the project manager works and creates that bid, it's about a 3-week process to choose to award the bid. So there's about a week of notice that you have to give once the bid is set, before it can kind of go official, and it has to be out for 2 weeks to get interested vendors in it. And so once we have once it goes out to bid and we get bids on the work, then we would move forward with whoever we choose. Similar process for both the paving and the rug project at the paving at both schools and the rug project at Smith Academy, except that we don't need a project manager for those. Those are both pretty straightforward jobs. And so we are in the process of finalizing those bid proposals this week. Those should go out next week. And again, it's about a 3-week process where we get bids. So about a week of notification, 2 weeks for people to get their applications in for the bid, and then we choose based on that. So we're still hopeful that the timeline will work out, that we'll be able to do things over the summer. I will say one of the caveats that came up during the OPM meet and greet was that they, and again, that person would really kind of take charge of managing those projects, was that there was some kind of consensus, I would say, among other folks that showed up, and there were about 5 or 6 folks that were there, that we may actually want to wait a little bit on at least the roof project, to get both better costs as well as more competitive bids in terms of quality competitive bids. And based on what they were seeing on the roof, there was the general impression that you wouldn't have to do the whole thing all at once, that because the roof is kind of broken into sections anyway, you could do kind of one section at a time. So again, we would work with them to kind of figure out what the best process forward would be on that. But there was also pretty solid consensus that we need boilers before before they turn them on.
Ask a couple questions
Hmm?
for sure.
Yeah. Go ahead, Kathy.
The selection of the OPM, is that you and Andrew?
It's primarily a town thing,
Okay.
but we've been working pretty closely.
Okay. And the paving, is that something that is hoping to be done before school starts, or?
Yes, yeah. So we're hoping that all these will be done before school starts. Once we get the bids in, we would have a more realistic timeline of what that would look like.
Okay.
Can you clarify regarding the roof?
Mhm.
Because you said that they were suggesting that it might be beneficial to wait
Yeah. So
until next summer?
No,
Okay.
no, until
I'm just trying to
until
like,
the
what
until
does
the
that?
fall
Because
or
I was
even
under the impression we couldn't really do the roof project while the students were there.
yeah. So
But
short
we
answer
could.
is you're right.
Okay.
We don't want them pounding on top of classrooms,
Right.
but there are sections that they could do pretty quickly over a weekend, or if there's a a
Okay.
long weekend or a break, they could do them. The rationale there was really, I mean, the biggest thing that they were saying was that at this point, most roofing companies are kind of booked out through the summer.
Right.
So if you get a roofing company that says, "Yeah, we're going to do it. We'll do it this summer," you might not get you might not get like the 18
Right.
that would come to do it. You
Or the
might,
best
yeah,
price.
or the best price.
Right.
Yeah, it's true.
Okay. All right. But we're not talking about like putting this off into 2026.
No.
Okay.
No,
I wanted to clarify
yeah,
that.
that's
Okay.
yes.
Can you speak to what stages and what questions or anything that the committee will see for review as we go through this?
Yeah. So, once after we create the bid proposals, we would give those for any feedback. Once we have um, the specifics of the bid, it's hard to say exactly right now because we don't have the we don't have any information from the bids, but we could have input about the vendors that we get, the proposals that we get in terms of timeline, in terms of what if I'm thinking about the carpets, what the color schemes or that kinds of things are, what the carpets are, what the quality is. If we wanted to do, I mean, I know we have quotes for tile versus carpet, and there are benefits to each. I lean towards carpet just mostly for acoustic reasons, but those are all things. Kind of those details are things that we could review as a committee before we make a final decision.
So in recent years, given sort of the number of committee assignments and the way work has happened, we have essentially merged facility issues in with finance because there's a
Right.
lot of crossover there. I think formally we have two different committees on the books, but as we're talking about subcommittees
Mhm.
and more facilities conversations coming up this year than some years, although every year seems like a facility year since I've been on here. Um, it might be something that that group, whether it's a joined committee or the same assignments on both committees so that they can meet at the same time so we don't have extra meetings to book,
Mm.
might be a place that we could have sort of a set of eyes that would be a little more nimble than trying to wait for business meetings. Because while I'm happy for us to see that stuff when it's appropriate, I also don't want to put the school in the position of like, I can't say yes to this until we get to a meeting and our schedule's a little
Right.
wonky because people
Mm.
are on vacation. So
Yeah.
I just want to float the idea that, and see what you guys think about if some of those conversations happen at a subcommittee level
Mm.
to keep the wheels of commerce moving.
Mm.
And hear from you what are the decisions that you want to make sure are coming back in front of the committee, the full committee, just so that there's no surprises as we go through this. Are there strong feelings on any of this?
I think it makes sense to have a smaller group, whether it's subcommittee of 2 people or 3 people that are available to make those decisions in a timely fashion. if it's 2 people, we would just need to authorize that subcommittee to make those decisions, because typically subcommittees do not take votes that are
True.
recorded
On
and
behalf of
counting.
the entire committee.
Right.
Yeah, I think, like you said, Chrissy, I'm like open to the idea in general. I do think we just want to be clear about then what kinds of things do come to the full committee. Right.
That's
Yeah,
exactly
so-
why I wanted
so
to
totally, yeah.
go through that tonight. And also just to acknowledge that some of this,
Mm.
like some of this is in our purview because it's very financial related.
Right.
And after that, while we may have opinions on the color of the carpet
Mhm.
or carpet versus tile, it's not really in the purview of a school committee to make
Right.
those choices. Though I'm sure we're happy to give our input if asked. It's not our gig,
Right.
right?
But there
Not
are
at all.
budgetary implications there.
Yes,
If they're, you know,
and
if we're
so-
talking about durability and longevity of something that's more expensive versus a
Mhm.
cheaper alternative that won't last,
Right.
those are things that we would want to consider.
And that's to me where it's like, that feels like it comes back into finance / facilities,
Mhm.
because that's a financial conversation at that
Mhm.
point.
Right.
Right.
It's not an aesthetic conversation per se.
I think, well, to have any subcommittee meeting, you still need to have
It's
the
still
48,
posted. Mhm.
right? You still need to have the 48-hour notice. So I think it would be, for me anyway, okay that you get the notice, we need to make a decision on this by Friday, so we have to post a meeting, and then you send information to the full committee. This is what we're going to meet on. Are there any concerns or more information you
Sure.
want? And then when you have the subcommittee meeting, and you have the input from everybody if they choose to give it to you.
Right.
But that would be a way to do it, so that we could previously authorize the budget committee, finance committee, sorry,
Mhm.
to make those decisions when there's consensus from the full committee. So that gives a parameter of, if you give the information ahead of time and there's enough questions or dissent, then you don't make that decision that week, and we try to schedule. It just gives a little room.
Yeah.
I don't want to
No,
exclude the
I'm just, like,
opportunity of.
considering, because I just think these are two really valid priorities that we have,
Mhm.
which is like functioning as a full board and also not being so bogged down in like a bureaucratic process that we can't do things correctly. So I'm just like sort of, I'm just mulling it over, I think, because I like the idea. I think for me, I don't know a really good way to say it, but basically, when it comes to a question of priorities, you know what I mean? Like if there is a question where it's going to be like, okay, it's this much money, which means we're then going to have to prioritize it over, I don't know, something else. You know what I mean? Like where
Right.
it becomes more of like a directional question, that's where I feel like it needs to come to the full committee. But when it's like,
Yeah.
hey, we know that we're doing this roof project and we just need to give responses to these people, then I feel totally fine about finance already, you know. And
Because it's finance is there to make sure it's staying within the budget.
yes,
Yada, yada.
yes, exactly. But so I don't think I'm expressing myself really well, but like when the financial questions do become a question of like direction, I think it needs to be
Okay.
for the full committee. If
So
that
there's
makes sense.
so there's the possibility then that we may have some extra meetings, because
Mm.
the part that I guess I want to make sure we don't do
Right.
is hamstring getting it done. So we'll just have to play that by ear, and I think we'll have a better sense once we have the OPM in place.
Mhm.
Who
Yeah,
can
I
come
think we
back
just
to us and
need to-
say, here's some of the key points
Yeah.
in the process. Let's make sure
Yeah,
we're
and like I said, I'm actually not interested in like micromanaging anything, just like, but if it's like, we're gonna have to pull the budget one place to like totally, you know what I mean?
right.
If it's a bigger
If
conversation.
it comes down to
then
like
those-
the direction of the district
But
and
if
how
it's
we're,
spending what we outlined to spend, the town
I'm fine, then
appropriated,
it's like, it's
that it's just
fine.
keeping the things
Right.
moving.
Yeah.
Right.
Gotcha. Okay. That sounds clear. Does that
Yeah,
sound clear to
yep,
you?
Is that-
Workable?
I'm not.
Does that sound workable to you?
That sounds fine.
Yeah.
I have a question about subcommittees, even though we're not like appointing them tonight or anything.
Mhm.
So like, I was just looking like I was like, what was the name of that other subcommittee that we have?
Uh-huh.
And it's multi-year and maintenance.
Mhm.
Which
That's the one that's sort of
That's the
Yeah.
one that's the.
That one used to
facilities
be
and-
there.
yeah, and but so when I look it up on the website,
Mhm.
I come up with like different lists of subcommittees on the website.
Well, there's subcommittees and then there's appointments, which is just one member. So like wellness or capital planning is like technically an appointment. And it was in
And
that same, it was in
collaborative.
that same policy.
But there's a separate one because there's like we have one listed as like school finance, then we have another one listed as school budget. So I'm just wondering if we have multiple policies posted on here. There's like BDB/E, and there's just
There
like,
might be one that we missed, but the one that you were, that one,
this is BDBE.
oh,
Which
it's
seems
like a
old.
dash. Yeah, it's still in line with what we're doing, just the name, I don't know why. It's like an attachment to the main policy, which is BDE.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the one though, like collaborative is like an appointment.
Okay.
did that solve?
Yeah.
There we are. Okay.
I think once, as Connor and you said, once the OPM is on board, we can,
And fingers crossed that may be in time for when we,
Mhm.
as we
Our
have
June
alluded,
meeting.
a second June meeting.
Mhm.
That micro meeting's getting a little bit longer, but
that's all right.
We do what we have to
Goes.
do.
okay.
Yeah, then we can make that motion to cover the finance subcommittee to make decisions on behalf of the full committee and the parameters.
If we're staying within the budget.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll make sure we have subcommittees on that next meeting, and that will be a piece of it. All righty. Okay, so back to your,
Back to my update.
Mm.
So that was facilities. In terms of hiring updates, we've hired some folks for positions for next year. Preschool is hired. First grade, we are in the final stages of that hiring.
so it's one person for first grade.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. The music position, we are in the process of hiring for that. We are posting a BCBA position. That's a replacement position for the second counselor position at HES. We are looking to hire, it looks like 3 ESPs, possibly one more at Smith Academy, as well as an RBT. So those postings will go up soon. We are in the final stages of hiring for the ELA position at Smith Academy, and recently found out at Smith Academy that Ms. Moulians is retiring this year. So she's retiring, and we have posted for that position too. Generally, we hire after 10 days of having a or not hire, but start interviewing after 10 days of having a posting open. So we posted that last week, and we already have applicants for it.
Nice.
That's great.
Can I clarify, please?
Mhm.
When you said about the first grade teacher and you said just one
spot. So it's a retirement.
It's a
right?
retirement, correct?
first grade.
Yes.
So will there be 1 or 2 teachers for first grade next year?
2 teachers. We're
Okay.
hiring one for Mr. Kyra. Yep.
That's what I just wanted to clarify because the way the
Sorry.
2 of you
Yep.
spoke,
Yeah.
it sounded like just
might be
one
a little-
teacher
Did
for
a little
first.
double take to it. I was like,
That's a-
hold on.
I think that's going to be a really full class. They're going to definitely
But I-
Yeah.
2 teachers.
Yeah.
I thought I understood it, but I
Yeah.
thought for anybody who's going to watch this, let's just be
sure.
very
Thank you.
clear
So we
that
hired
it's 2.
I'm always
2
team
preschool-
clarify.
The 1 preschool teacher, so there will be 2
There'll be-
preschool rooms.
Yep.
We're hiring 1 first grade teacher, so there will be 2 first grade rooms.
Yes.
And the music position, is that the band only, or is that all music?
No, that's all music. Yep.
With 6th grade moving up,
Mhm.
will the elementary band be 5th grade only, or is it going to open up to
I think
4th
it's
and
gonna-
5th?
I think it's going to open more. Yes, I think we'll be starting earlier. And
Well,
given
we budgeted to handle that a little differently.
we did,
Yeah?
yeah. Yeah, so yeah, given the if it's part of the extended day program, it could open up further too.
Okay.
So that's to be determined, but it will at least include 2 grades at the elementary school.
Nice.
But not necessarily the same teacher.
Correct. Yeah, could be,
Maybe.
but it
We love her.
doesn't have to be. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, so that's that update. And the last update is the school choice update I wanted to highlight. We have 29 students who have accepted their slots for school choice for next year.
Nice.
So 29 new incoming students for next year. It looks like we have district-wide maybe around 14 who are departing or thinking of. We don't have firm numbers until we get
Mhm.
confirmation of that. But that includes everyone. So that's anyone who may be thinking of school choicing out, as well as anyone who's going to planning to attend Smith Vocational next year.
We've had years where that would be all vote. So that's
Mhm. Yeah,
Mhm.
I think generally the average for Voc has been about 9, and so we're down significantly from there this year, um, and we have a lot of new faces coming in at both schools. So it's split relatively evenly between schools.
questions. Nothing?
I have a question on the elementary school report, but I don't know if, Connor, you can answer it.
I can try, but I'm not sure.
For a while now, I've been seeing on the calendar for upcoming events that the moving up ceremony for both 5th and 6th grades is on June 13th, but at different times. And nowhere has it ever said what time for either of them. And I think it would be helpful to know what time for either of them for people beyond the families that are affected by it.
Mhm.
Mhm.
If anybody else wanted to attend either of them or both of them, it would be helpful to know when that is happening.
So I don't have the answer for you right now, but
Okay.
I can get that feedback out there to make sure that gets posted.
Yeah, if we could have that sent out for
Mhm.
all parents and guardians and whatever.
In the Smith Academy update, I think the ones that you may have printed were before I got them. I rounded them out today, but that was mostly about the past week or so of kind of celebrating what has been going on at Smith Academy. So we had a lot of awards ceremonies. We had our class day celebration last Wednesday. We had our senior banquet Wednesday night. Thursday we had the Lions Club celebration, the academic night. Friday we had graduation. Today we had underclass awards, and that's it. That's a lot of busy week, and it all kind of culminated last Friday for graduation, which was just a beautiful evening.
Dr. S., do you want to check in?
Sure. So just one of the things that I mentioned was that end of year kind of cleaning up with the positions being vacated and new staff coming on board, people being out sick. And we're trying to make sure that everything is buttoned up as to where it should be. Like we were talking about earlier, uh, the the caseloads for some of the staff have been large. I know we're still actually trying to hire for that third special ed teacher, and we had offered the position to a person that backed out of it, and then offered the position to another individual who actually declined. So we're still looking to fill that third position. But with the absences, the positions being vacant, we're also trying to look at the number or the volume of tests and reevals that are coming up at the end of the year and what's kind of like falling in between both years and making sure that we're taking the time to get things scheduled as best as we can. But there has been kind of like a crunch with that. And because of the volume of the number of kids to be tested, we did try well, we didn't try. We actually put this into place several months ago, and increasing one of the hours of the intern that is actually working with our school psychologist to help out with some of that testing, but that's still been pretty tight. And while we did have a vacancy at the end of April, like myself and other people did kind of like help out with some of the testing at that time. So those things that not really clean, but I think we're trying to work towards making sure that they're completed. Beyond that, extended school year, I think we're in a pretty good spot right now relevant to our staffing. There are a couple positions that over the summer are relevant to one-to-ones. We have a student that is basically not necessarily coming back to the district. They've always been enrolled with us, but outplaced. And we're looking for somebody to work with that student as a one-to-one because of a high medical need.
Okay. Um, so I appreciate that there's just been a lot of testing, and I've got a little insight, but I think others might benefit to understand how we sort of why we've had so much testing of late. Do you want to speak a little bit to, like, I don't know, it feels like a little ricochet or a
Sure.
ripple?
Sure. Some of the things that I can probably speak to are the fact that, like our early intervention services, we don't in this district, uh, we get referrals from early intervention on an individual basis. Most of the districts I've actually worked in, those referrals kind of, we get a heads up at the beginning of the year for every student that's going to be like 2.5 years old to about 3 years old. So we've been talking about trying to prep for that coming, like say in August, to actually try to get a list from the early intervention services as to who might be coming in over the year instead of hearing about these things when the student is already 2.5 or over 2.5 years old. So with our tracking log, we're trying to make it so that we're doing kind of like a check with that on a monthly basis, at least twice a month. So we have an evaluation team meeting that takes place, and for things that we want to try to avoid, we don't want things to get caught up in BST when they should be coming to the special education department for an evaluation. I know that last year, one of the first things I actually was dealing with was actually addressing an issue where a student had been referred for an evaluation back in March of last year, but that took like several months before it actually reached the special ed department. So trying to make sure that we're utilizing our time to best use our tracking log to make sure that it's completed and to make sure that there's nobody hanging in limbo that we are kind of like missing or falling through the cracks in some way.
Yeah.
There's also some of the things that we talked about relevant to kind of like this shift in where we are uh, post COVID, and how essentially that affects students over the long term. Like I mentioned, I did pick up some testing recently myself to try to help out with the caseload while we had staff out. And one of the things I noticed was kind of a testing pattern it's been 18 years since I actually have tested anybody, but I did kind of notice the student that I tested, it was kind of a hit and miss pattern. And I had asked the student during testing, any gaps in like your education or like extended illnesses, anything like that. And the student couldn't give me really kind of like a clear answer with that. But when we get into the team meeting and started talking about it, it became abundantly clear that we were talking about some missed opportunities during COVID for that first couple of years, and that probably explained a lot of the foundational learning that that student would have picked up in the early elementary years.
Yeah.
So I think there is also this, and we've seen this. I've talked about this with our high numbers or percentages relevant to kids on IEPs. You see that in a lot of districts, and I think that is also kind of like a culmination of post-pandemic America, is that we see more kids getting referred for emotional disabilities, and those kids that didn't receive foundational skills, 5 years ago, that are still struggling with some of the basics now.
Plus, isn't there is
Yeah,
one more?
and there's a little historical, I think, COVID background too. And you can correct me if I'm wrong about this, but I believe this is the case. Was that so during the 20 and 21 school year, which was the real kind of I mean, aside from the full closure in 2020, there was a lot of stuff that was kind of punted during that school year in terms of testing and in terms of reevals, that kind of thing. And it goes on a 3-year cycle. So a lot of those were bumped and kind of punted to the next school year, which was the 2021-22 school year. So that school year, that second, that kind of first regular quote unquote school year was a time where we saw a big bump and jump in the number of just the sheer number of students that we needed to reevaluate because it goes in it. A lot of folks didn't get it done during that kind of chopped up year. So we are now 3 years from that. So that wave, that was an increased wave 3 years ago, is crashing again. And at the same time, we have had a lot of kind of churn and turnover in the special ed department. It's been a kind of disjointed year there. So those two things have I think also combined to to make a crunch time.
Yeah. I would say that at that time, just when the pandemic was hitting, I was accepting a job in another district for the following year. And the district I worked in, we were trying to do virtual meetings right up through the early stages of the pandemic until the end of the year. But that next year, the district that I took over, they did not. And we had something like around 125 cases within the first 5 months and it was annuals and reevals, but that's a huge caseload to then start to see that kind of like pattern start to repeat itself again.
It means that where you might have a third, a third, a third every 3 years, you have sort of like 2/3 and a third, and then a quiet year. Like not quite that dramatic,
Right.
but this is our
Or 2/3
it's our wave. It's our 2/3 year. So
the road wave.
it's something that we're gonna have to, and I think you guys have plans to how to get out of the wave. Yeah.
We have a plan to, I'm going to use a horrible phrase, but a plan to flatten the curve.
Wow. Yeah.
Oh, while we're on the COVID.
Like can we shift people like to at one point do it like at year 2 instead of year 3 so that to shift the burden, or is that
Well, one thing, so this is more involved topic, but often what happens in every district that I've worked in is that there are annual reviews, and the way people write IEPs, they don't always use the end date of the existing IEP as the end date for the next IEP, and they'll use like the meeting date for some reason. That's characteristically been a problem in every district I've worked in, which means when your reevaluation is supposed to be coming up in 3 years and that date doesn't change, but all of a sudden your annual date's due and you're having 2 meetings per year. An annual review date, either before or after, depending on when the meeting took place and when people actually wrote the IEP, and change that date. And then you've got this annual review. So I know some of the things that, like the end of the year cleanup, we've had cases where we're supposed to be doing an annual review and a reevaluation. And we kind of recognize some of that earlier in the year and try to combine about maybe 8 of those cases so that we weren't like double dipping on meetings and saying to the parents, can we run these both at once? But part of the problem was trying to get the volume of testing done at the same time. So the volume of testing is greater this year than it was like the year before. But it's going to take, I think we're in a good place as far as like with the tracking log and our plan for using our evaluation meetings, and knowing that we're not going to probably be hit as heavy as we were this year.
Can you explain, just because I'm naive to this, can you explain to me the difference between the annual review and the every 3-year review?
So the every 3-year review is when testing is redone to determine eligibility by doing standardized testing.
Okay.
So it's usually done in the area of the suspected disability. So you do your initial evaluation, and that's also focuses or targets the area of the suspected disability. And then you have annual review meetings for the first 2 years, and you're supposed to have really what's a combined annual reevaluation meeting for the 3rd year. And so consents get sent out, and this is another problem with consents. We send them out, and sometimes I'm not sure what happens to them. We have a timeline once the consent is signed. And I do have to say that we've had some consents come back, like at what I'm going to describe as is not the perfect timing, especially when you're less than 30 days left of school and you've got a consent coming in and people are still doing testing and have a full caseload. Sometimes we might start the testing like this time of year, and then we might finish some of the testing in September. Again, not an ideal, but because of the way the timelines fall, That's sometimes how it works out.
Thank you
Sure.
for the extra info. The school finance committee report, you'll recognize that school finance did not meet, but we hold the right to call you back in June, particularly to talk about some possible transfers. We'll have to wait and see.
Mhm.
We've known, this is not new news, we've known since the fall that we probably were going to need to transfer some additional school choice funds, but we're waiting to the last minute to see how little we can do.
Mhm.
And we talked about the capital projects already, so we'll turn to policy.
Okay, so as discussed in our previous meetings, our focus right now is on the conduct policies. So we have 2 today brought forward to the committee. Policy JK is unchanged since the last reading. This is the 3rd reading. And then policy JIC does have changes since our last reading. So JIC, student discipline, is the major policy regarding disciplinary action for when student conduct expectations are not upheld. So the content edits that we made were generally in the core principles and communication of expectations section towards the beginning, because as a subcommittee, we really wanted to make sure that we are being very clear to the degree that we can on the district level about sort of the different, like our philosophy towards conduct and discipline, as well as, including, it's not fully comprehensive certainly, but some of the tools that we might use to help redirect student behavior early, right? So starting in the classroom and as we can, to try to re-engage that student learning and make sure that we have a good, safe, productive learning environment for all of our students and staff. As the policy continues, it becomes more specific and increasingly, in some ways, just regulatory regarding suspensions and expulsions. And it's very specific regarding the legal process around that and sort of the kinds of conduct that would lead to those decisions. This has been seen by our legal team at least once. We made a lot of formatting and style edits. I do want to just note specifically that the handbooks, the individual school handbooks, will include more specifics regarding the code of conduct for each school. So we had a lot of discussion around sort of developmental ages and like what works in certain grades at Smith Academy that would probably not work as effectively in elementary school and the other way around. So the handbooks are also going to really tie into this, but our goal with JIC is to set sort of the direction for the entire district regarding this topic. So this is a 2nd reading. We are invested in passing this policy so that the handbooks can be aligned to it, but we also recognize we want to give it the diligence it deserves. So that's my probably long-winded introduction. I would love to have a discussion from the committee about our most recent edits and the policy in general, if any.
I just want to start by saying I appreciate this is a massive bit of policy.
It's a huge policy. We've been working very, very hard on it.
Huge conversation, and it's tentacled in a lot of different directions,
Mhm.
and so kudos for jumping in on this. I don't need to lead out comments. Are there anybody else that wants to start? I have a few questions, but I don't need to go first.
Kathy, do you have anything else to add about our work?
I'd just like to add that we really made a conscious shift in language
Mhm.
and intent on this policy. Previous forms of this policy really focused on the punishment and the punitive aspect of student discipline.
Mhm.
And we made a conscious choice to shift it to educating students and owning it, reflecting on it, moving on from it, making repairs. and not to have academic punishments, but it's all still well within educating students in civil behavior and responsibilities.
Yeah, I would agree that we definitely have been trying to think very carefully. You know, and we have had lots of meetings, certainly with the administration, but also the district SEL team, just about like what environment we want to see in our schools, right? Like, what are these positive behaviors that we want to see? And when someone doesn't uphold those expectations, like, how do we help that student while also maintaining that like safe and welcoming environment for our whole entire
Yeah.
school community? And it is not easy, to
Right.
do this, but we're hoping that we're moving in the right direction.
Reading through this and having read the past policy, I feel the change in the language, and I think that's awesome, because it's. I mean, we can all talk about the pound of flesh, but if we aren't like it's about kids learning, and if it's
And we want
like,
it to be
what's the point?
effective.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so getting to what's consequences that will have an impact and change behavior, not just consequence for consequence sake. Um, so I think my questions get in not to any challenge of what's there.
Mm.
I think this is particularly clear for things that are really big. So
Mhm.
if it's headed towards suspension, like this is really clear now about like here's the process and here's what has to happen and the order that it happens and
Mhm.
who's involved, like that's great. And I'm like, yep. I think my questions tend to be looking at things that don't quite get to that level.
Mhm.
Um, and what are the guidelines for behavioral consequences when it's not going to reach the level of suspension, but still needs consequence? And is there enough clarity to that? And maybe that doesn't live here. Maybe that lives in the handbook. Because there isn't, I mean, obviously, what is appropriate for a ninth grader is not appropriate for a third grader.
Right.
I don't know if there's a philosophical piece to that that lives here, or
Yeah.
if it's, I could see that being more in the handbook. So
Mhm.
it's a question. Do you want me to, I'll pause
Do
between
you want me
questions.
to respond?
Sure, if you have a,
Because this has been a huge topic of
Yeah.
all of our meetings, because you're 100% right that the previous iterations of this policy literally were only focused on suspension. Like suspension, expulsion, that was it. So I'm really glad that we're including this, and this has been actually where the bulk of our work has been. I think we did have, I do think a lot of it is going to live in the handbooks. That being said, I think we are still open to refining, right? Our
Mhm.
core principles. We tried to set a district tone. We actually had a good discussion at our last meeting about the developmental stage of the
That's-
students, and we discussed
Mhm.
adding a line, but never really settled on one that specifically said those words, although
that's in line with one of my other questions, so I'm going to
Mhm.
raise it now just to be
Yeah,
efficient.
go ahead.
So what did I imagine this came up,
Hmm.
but how a student's disability impacts the discipline process, if it does. And so how does that fold in here?
Yeah.
Because is that, I mean, some disabilities create behaviors that are going to be more like, how does that work into a policy? I see John raising his
Yeah.
hands. He's ready to jump.
Actually, even if the student's not identified as being on an IEP, if we suspect that they have a disability, we have to treat them as if they do have a disability. And there is the whole manifestation process that starts to kick in at that point, where we're looking for patterns of behavior
Right.
and taking specific steps instead of just going right to essentially suspending somebody.
Right. So what I will speak to regarding the policy subcommittee is that, yes, we discussed this topic at length. And disappointingly, we have not been able to find, or we had not yet been able to find a good, like, reference policy that
Mhm.
directly addresses this, because it really does become very much like legal and regulatory. So
Perhaps
be-
John has something.
yes, perhaps John does. So what I will say is that we did link in our references, in the cross references at the bottom, we have direct links to information regarding discipline and students under Section 504 of the ADA as well as the IDEA. So that information is referenced there, but we had not been able to settle on wording
Yeah.
in the policy. We would love to include that.
Yeah.
And we discussed including it, but we did not yet feel quite like we had the right words to
words.
put down. But that is something that we would like to also include. And yes, our reference policies that we could find, especially because this is such a legal topic, we like to at least have a
Mhm.
reference policy to look at, and we could not find one.
We do have
Yeah.
sections of
Mm.
disciplines for student.
I'm
discipline
sorry,
for
we did
student-
also look at the handbooks.
Yeah, so
that
those
do have
sections exist
sections.
in the handbooks.
Mhm,
But again, those are very kind of legal driven
mhm.
sections of the handbook. They're not. It's not. It's not as kind of reflective of what the subcommittee was trying to do with having this kind of philosophical approach. So it would be worthwhile possibly to take a look at
Mhm.
at those and adapt something from that to your policy.
Yeah, we did. You're right. Thank you for bringing that up. We did look at some of the handbook language, and we would like to include something, but we didn't get it in yet.
Yep.
There's
And,
a lot to this.
and
Yes.
get some feedback
Yes.
from John.
Hmm.
There
Yeah.
are. So I think this is my last tentacle.
No, I mean, this is a huge
And
policy.
again, and I'm not saying it belongs here. It may belong somewhere else. Is there a shared district expectation of what an investigation process looks like? So Connor and I have had some discussion about this too, in terms of when there's an incident, what does that like? This picks up sort of post investigation,
Mhm.
right? After you figured out like this is what happened. But do we want to also include whether it lives outside this policy or inside this policy? I don't know. It might be a reference that links, but some sort of district incident response and investigation practice so that there's sort of a shared expectation. Honestly, whether it's in the class, at the classroom level or beyond just the classroom level, to if something happens, how are we going to go about understanding the incident from
Right.
all relevant perspectives so that we have a really clear picture?
Right. Rather than just being reactionary to partial information.
Right. So because once you get to the hearing, like there's all of this sets up. It's like you don't have good intel at the front of that.
Right.
It's going to be harder to have good outcomes.
Yeah.
And so
And I do think that in some ways the regulation around the suspension hearings theoretically would help some of that
Mhm.
occur, but there's also like the majority of our sort of like student discipline issues are not
they don't get
at
to
that level.
Yeah.
So I think there's room definitely for a discussion there. I would say that in the core principles section, we have like one line that says staff members are expected to always exercise reasonable and professional judgment regarding disciplinary action, which is like great, but it's very non-specific. So I do think there is room for us to be a little bit more specific in that area if the committee would like to see that.
And there was a line about mitigating
Yes,
circumstances.
so that's as part of the
Yeah.
hearing, right?
yeah.
As part of, I
sorry.
think. Oh, no. But that's what I'm
I
saying.
couldn't
Is
remember where I
it is?
saw it.
It's so long.
It
It's
does
so
show
long.
up.
But that is more like once we're at the level of like
Yeah.
emergency removals and beyond.
Mhm.
But before that, we don't have. Yeah. And Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it just feels like having a philosophy of making sure that you're getting
Yeah.
all the feedback.
Mhm.
If there are sort of ways to articulate that, which I hope
Might be
all
able
of
to
our
use some
staff
of
do
the
too, even when it's just a
wording
small thing in a
of one
classroom.
section and like,
Mm.
you know what I
Just
mean?
not one
Adapt
kid's
it for other
word.
things.
Right.
Something happened.
Tie it in that way.
Definitely. We might be able to like borrow some of this and move it up. We're wordsmithing already. Like,
Hey, I'm all for it. And again, this may not live here, but I've kept looking to sort of understand when there are consequences that are in school, not
Mhm.
suspension, where accountability sits, so that
for
the follow through,
accountability for
follow through of
making sure the
in-school
consequence
consequences.
occurs.
Mhm.
Yep.
So there's a little bit that sort of speaks to all professionals have a like. There's like one line that's sort of a
It's kind of just like,
principal and staff would
Yep.
have responsibilities to.
mhm. Right. And again, that portion that is less clear is all in the section that occurs prior to emergency removal
Yes.
plus. Yeah. Yep. Okay.
Which, I mean, feels like where most of the issue, like majority of the issues live.
Yes, absolutely. And it was shocking to me to discover that most districts do not have policy that like addresses everything that happens before an emergency removal, which is why we brought this policy forward. But there's a lot of work for us to do. So
Frankly, after reading this and wordsmithing it over and over and over again, it's easy to miss that
yeah.
piece that's missing because
Yeah.
we've talked it out so much.
No,
that
we
maybe we're
appreciate the committee
understanding it,
feedback.
but it's not there.
yeah, and also, like I said, we do not have like a reference
Yeah.
for this sort of like prior to, well, I mean, we have certainly sources that we've looked at, but there's not like an example policy that we can do. So we really appreciate the feedback from the committee, certainly.
This is definitely so much different from the
What it was before.
zero tolerance years.
Oh gosh.
And those were
Yeah.
really harsh,
Just like not
policies.
effective.
And I am so glad we've moved from that.
Yeah, I would love to just see a district where like we have these high expectations that we can uphold in like a positive way for the entire community.
Well, I'm very appreciative that you guys took this on. Thank you.
I'm generally pretty satisfied with it. It's broad. It leaves the opportunity for anything from it leaves a lot of discretion to the teachers, to the principals, to the superintendents. It gives them discretion to go anything from like a minor punishment to a more severe punishment. It doesn't preclude anything. It doesn't block
Mhm.
anything, but it doesn't prescribe anything specifically. And that's more out of the handbook that we're going to deal with that.
The like more granular
Yeah.
specifics. Yes.
So that's, yeah, I'm fine. There's a missing the in the
Oh.
first paragraph under suspension.
For heaven's sake.
I know. Right about in the middle, there's a comma on the right, and then it says principal. I feel like it should say the principal. Does it need to say the principal or their designee every single
Everywhere.
time?
Probably.
Because like in that situation, it doesn't.
I feel like
Or can we just have, like-
asked legal about this.
And the response was that it should.
We had changed so many, but
Yeah.
I guess we didn't change all of them. So
I think we tried to get all of them.
Okay.
that we
But
will
he
we will note
he
that
hemmed and
for
hawed
more.
a bit and then came down, just change them all.
Okay.
I'm telling you,
Because like in the next paragraph alone, there's several like principals where without designees.
We
It's going to get
also-
redundant. sounding,
it's
but-
so redundant. And we had to go down an entire rabbit hole on capitalization and all these other
Yeah.
things like I mean, what I'm most interested in is the content and substance, but all the other stuff has also been
Could there be a disclaimer at the
great.
beginning that says like for every time it says principal, this it means also or their
I think
designee?
that's a smart idea.
We asked that.
we
Okay.
I said you could, but I'd also still add it everywhere.
Oh.
I would just do both.
All right.
Mm.
Well, kudos to the policy team. Thank you guys. I have no comments on JK.
Yeah, JK has remained the same, and it is sort of vague. It's very broad, but it's like these are the positive behaviors that we want to see.
Yep.
I think
That's the expectation.
we feel
for
good
sure.
about it.
Because that was really more about conduct versus the discipline piece.
Right. Like this is how you should all
So
behave.
for the sake of efficiency, can we just table JK until we
Yeah.
bring the other back?
We can
We'll
vote them as a
vote them
bundle.
through
I'm
Yeah.
fine
together.
with that
Yeah.
completely.
Okay. So I would like to have this come back to
And
the next meeting, if that's okay with you guys.
you have the notes on that.
Yeah.
And then we'd
Thank
still
you.
have some feedback in June before handbooks.
Sure.
Okay. So with that, we get to move on to our last star-studded part of the night, which is the superintendent annual review.
I can
And
pull.
we have some slides for that. So one of any school committee's primary duties is to evaluate the superintendent. And this is our opportunity to do so. And thank you for being our slide mover here. If you want to move on to the next one. Feels weird to ask you to flip
That's all
slides
right.
for your own evaluation. So for those following along at home, in the fall, Dr. Driscoll presented his goals, which the committee approved. We had a mid-year check-in in the winter. And then in May, we did something a little bit different this year. And I hope we would have done this regardless, but this is part of what will be in the new contract upcoming with the HTA, is to include 360 reviews so that administrators are getting feedback from all angles. So we actually put together 2 separate 360 reviews. One that reviewed Dr. Driscoll as a principal because he wears 2 pretty distinct hats in some respect. And so that review went out to all Smith Academy faculty and staff. And then a separate, similar but not the same review went out to review him as his superintendent duties. And that went to district staff, anyone who reports to him directly in that function, as well as HTA leadership and community leadership. And all of that review material came back to the committee, and all 5 school committee members had an opportunity to review that, in addition to Dr. Driscoll's self-evaluation and the evidence he provided for that review. We've used all the state-required review points and rubrics. We just put it into a Google form to make it a little bit easier to manage. The responses and cumulative feedback is an average of what all 5 of us put forward. And then I facilitated a composite note to each sort of standard where there was room for notes. And that reflects the feedback from all 5 committee members. And in addition to all of that, we also have privately shared the 360 feedback with Dr. Driscoll. So tonight is about reviewing the cumulative review and the committee's opportunity to make changes, because we haven't discussed this. That would be inappropriate for us to have debated in private. And so this is your opportunity to take a look at that review, see if it lines up with making sure your voice is heard in the cumulative review, and we would need to vote on that to formally give that evaluation. So with that, we're going to go pretty quickly through those, what the pieces are in the review. So if you want to go to the next slide. Standard 1 on instructional leadership, the specific call out, there were 3 specific call outs pertaining to instructional leadership. Dr. Driscoll received a rating of proficient as it relates to assessment. Go to the next one. He received a proficient on evaluation, which is about supervision of staff. And on the third, on data-informed decision-making, he received the rating of proficient. On standard 2, skip over those comments. On standard 2, management and operation related to environment, which is about the entry and dismissal, school buildings being clean and safe and welcoming, and safe and supportive learning environments for students. The rating was needs improvement. On the second piece of management and operations, the human resources management and development, the rating was proficient. On standard 3, the first specific was around engagement, and the rating was proficient. The second was sharing responsibility, and that, just to clarify, is about collaborating with families and others to help support student learning development, and that was rated proficient. And professional culture is the next standard. Specific was continuous learning, and the rating was proficient. And shared vision, and the rating was proficient. And then we get, I believe, into district. Dr. Driscoll had specific goals. The first was related to a district improvement plan, and the committee judged that that goal was met. And goal 2 was around participating in the new superintendent program, and that goal was met. The third was related to a focus on relationships, connections, and belonging, and the rating was that the goal was met. Goal 4 was around maintaining a focus on academic rigor and instructional excellence, and that goal was met. And I would like to read the overall summative performance feedback, because I think this is the kind of captures it all. Dr. Driscoll concludes his first full year as superintendent principal with a performance rating of proficient. And incidentally, that is DESE's goal for all superintendents. This assessment reflects both the progress made under his leadership and the recognition that continued growth and refinement are expected, as these are his early years of district leadership. Across multiple domains, Dr. Driscoll has demonstrated investment, integrity, and inventiveness. His commitment to the district is evident in the relationships he has cultivated, his thoughtful approach to strategic planning, and his willingness to confront long-standing challenges. His leadership on initiatives such as transparent budgeting, instructional improvements, and program development reflects a desire to strengthen Hatfield Public Schools in both structure and spirit. A strong professional culture has begun to take root, grounded in openness, optimism, and collaboration. Staff and community members consistently note his approachability, compassion, and willingness to learn from feedback, traits that foster trust and signal a commitment to continuous improvement. At the same time, areas for development remain. Time management, communication, and operational follow-through have emerged as key areas for refinement. Some procedural delays, missed deadlines, and inconsistencies in internal and public-facing communications have been noted. These are not uncommon in a first-year superintendent, particularly one serving simultaneously as principal, but they warrant focused attention in the year ahead. Challenges in staffing, especially in special education, along with ongoing concerns about student retention and district visibility, highlight the need for additional proactive planning, stronger internal systems, and expanded community outreach. Greater consistency in promoting school events, sharing achievements, and maintaining updated platforms for communication will help build community confidence and support. Despite the learning curve, Dr. Driscoll has made a meaningful impact in his first year. His thoughtful leadership, moral clarity, and openness to growth form a strong foundation for continued success. With a more focused scope, strengthened systems, and the benefit of experience, the Hatfield School Committee has a strong confidence in his ability to lead the district forward successfully. And so I would open this to the committee if there are changes you would like to see reflected, and if not, a motion to approve this review.
I thank the chair for putting the work on the evaluation and the summative, writing it up. It's very well written, and I think it reflects well of the intentions from the evaluation. doesn't need to be added to the report, but I would just add that I think we continue to look forward to working with you and building success for our district with you.
Thank you. Likewise.
Any other additions, comments, changes?
No, I think this is reflective, and I also look forward to your continued work.
You don't have to say
Yeah, no, I don't have
Just-
anything to add.
I would, add that the 360 feedback was also really positive. I think it's reflected in the committee's feedback as well because the committee had access to that. But I guess I just want to note that for the record. So the that all of those who contributed feedback understand that it was heard and appreciated and reviewed and shared. So, and you were also, if you have any feedback, if there's anything you want to
No, I
speak
think
to.
I think this has been thorough and has been really helpful to get the feedback, not just from the committee, but also from the 360 feedback that I might not get otherwise. So I appreciate that as part of the process.
I think there are more districts that are including a 360 and starting that.
Mhm.
I think it's a really good thing.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of talk about them, listservs and things like that. Too.
I'm glad we're in the front of that car
Mm.
for us.
Let's
So-
go.
Would you like a motion? I'll make a motion to approve the superintendent annual report or summative report as presented.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? All in favor of the performance review as stated? Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Okay. And so we will figure out how we share that back to Desi.
Great. Well, thank you. I appreciate it, and
Thank
I
you.
also look forward to continuing to work with you all.
Okay.
Thanks for the hard work in the first full year.
Yeah.
Yes.
It couldn't have been easy, and all your hard work was appreciated.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
That isn't particularly well captured in the Desi form, but it is very much felt.
That's fair.
Okay. And that concludes our night. I'll make a motion for adjourn.
Do you want, before we adjourn, did you want to look at any possible dates at the end of the month, just to have an idea, since you have four of us right here to,
Can do that.
in case anybody has anything that is a
The
no.
question is, I don't know if we
They're all no's.
They're all
have
no's.
anything that's ready. So understand this would be a remote meeting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Its focus is going to be on transfers, subcommittee appointments, and one policy.
How close to June 30 does it have to be?
As close as we can get it, probably.
and would you be trying evening or daytime or whatever works?
I'm assuming evening is going to be what is available.
Okay.
If people would rather do it in the day, I'm flexible. I just am assuming that we'll count folks out.
I am not available the evening of the 25th, but otherwise I am. And daytime would be like all over the place of availability.
23 and 24 would be ideal, but I don't know if that's too early.
Do you think we could have transfers known by the 23rd?
Or 4th?
I think we could.
Mr. Sullivan, how does that look for you?
That should be fine. I can also do Wednesdays during the day. I continue to have Wednesdays free. On that weird
What
day.
if could we do the 24th maybe, and then that gives us a little more breathing room for the policy too. We also have to get in policy. Yeah,
Okay, so let's
either way.
tentatively hold can you do a Tuesday evening?
Sure. I'm on vacation that week, so
Oh,
out I will make it
Will it
virtually.
be?
Yeah, as
Sure?
long as I can do it virtually.
It's all going to be virtual no
Yeah.
matter what. You're
Might-
not
you might
off
get
at
me at the
some
beach.
campsite that doesn't
No,
have
I'm not-
Wi-Fi.
I'm not in the middle of the woods that week.
Okay.
That's later in the summer.
Okay, so let's hold that for now.
The 24th.
Subject to change, but at least that's a starting point.
Yep.
And that gives policy a chance to figure out when we can meet
Mhm.
before that.
And finance to review transfers.
Yeah.
So we have 2 meetings to book before that
Mhm.
one.
Okay.
Alrighty.
Thank you so much.
Motion
Now I'm
to
going to make a
adjourn, yeah.
motion to
Seconded.
adjourn.
Okay.
Thank you all. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
It's the most enthusiastic vote of the night. We're all
Almost.
ready.
It's not even 8:30.